Well, hello and welcome to our Hopeful Discussions podcast. My name is Tommy of Crossing Tommy, and this is a space for honest conversations about the grace and presence of God, not only in the easy or tidy parts of life, but right in the middle of the hardest and most confusing parts of modern living. Scripture tells us that God is our refuge and strength and a very present help in trouble, and that truth shapes everything we do here. On this podcast, we talk with people who are willing to speak honestly about where they've been, what they've learned, and how God has met them and led them into what He has called them to, sometimes in ways they did not expect, and sometimes in ways that they prayed for. Our hope is to speak openly and listen well, and to make room for real questions, especially for people who feel isolated, uncertain, or unsure where they belong. We also want to demonstrate that God is still present and working today, including places the church may not always recognize as mission fields. And today we have the honor and privilege of being joined by Professor Christian Washington of Huntington University Arizona. Professor Washington works at the intersection of animation, storytelling, education, mentorship, and faith. He helps prepare students to pursue excellence in creative careers while also investing in them during a significant season of life, when many are wrestling with questions of identity and purpose. We invited Professor Washington because his work embodies the important truth that God does not shy away from artists and creatives. Their gifts matter, their talents are entrusted to them by the Lord, and their work has always been and will continue to be part of what shapes culture. They need both spiritual discipleship and practical preparation for the environments that they are entering. Professor Washington, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we get into those subjects, would you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and how God led you to where you are?
Hey, Tommy, of course. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. The more I've been learning about what you guys have been doing, I think it's such a cool ministry. Just even coming from a place of starting conversations with people who, can help us help inform, the world we live in. But yeah, if I'm to break down a little bit about
Thank you.
who I am, I'm a full-time professor and animation producer. I've also published a few comic books. I don't know if you can see any of the posters behind me, but some of them are from the works I've worked on. I
Very
also
cool.
happen to be a father of one, and I have another one on the way. We're hoping in just a couple of weeks he'll show up if he's on time, praying he's on time. A little bit more about me. I absolutely love working with artists, which is one of the reasons why working as an animation professor, it's hard for me to imagine myself doing anything else. I have the privilege of just coming into work day after day and just helping young talent make incredibly cool stuff and encouraging them and walking alongside of them. And above all else, I'm a follower of Christ. I've been a believer for a long time. Basically, in high school is where I really kind of took that major step of like not just going to church, but doing my very best to understand who Christ is and live out who He's called me to be. And that informs a lot of my day to day choices and how I look at the world as well. So, yeah.
Wow. Praise God. That is really great. And so you can understand, especially just how important that influence is right at that cusp between leaving childhood almost entirely behind and walking into adulthood. And how important a good godly voice that will direct a person with truth and the truth of God can really actually form and shape someone. So that tells me a lot about you.
Yeah, I know I'm a little bit biased because I work at a university, but one of the reasons I felt so comfortable stepping into this role, my college years were some of the most impactful years of my life. God surrounded me by amazing people. I just learned about myself and the world in a way that was really key to my development. And so I know there's a lot of controversy around college. In my opinion, if you pick a good university, you'll have a great time and you'll learn a lot. I think a lot of the people who are most frustrated with college maybe just stepped into an institution that, didn't just help guide them on their path the way they were expecting.
Yeah, and I think that is a really common thread right now is that our young people might not even know if they're, if you will, buying the right degree or buying the right training for their future life. But then I think it's also potentially not emphasized enough that your values and the values you are already carrying can matter so much. And if you go into a place of just opposition or that doesn't offer that kind of support, then I think it really just leaves someone open to kind of being led anywhere. Um,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
yeah, it's
so true.
interesting. Um, I really appreciate this comment over here. I think this is so reflective of what any experience actually can be. Like you were saying, it says, college was life changing for me, and so thankful for what God did in my life during that time. And I did not complete my college years, but the time that I had was incredibly formative for me. And then the time afterwards, the influences and that crucial time of my life absolutely formed me and helped me to not only be introduced to values, but then discipled me into walking out what those values really look like and mean. And so it cannot be understated how important it is for us to walk into our calling and to be willing to pour into people.
Yeah, that transition from, your teenage years into adult years is really tough for everyone. I think we don't talk about it enough. It's so hard to make that jump. I think, again, the right university can help with that. I also think there's a number of avenues that can serve that same need, like whether, you get involved with the right ministry, maybe you check out a trade school, maybe you find an organization where you serve. I think it could look different for everyone, but I think it's really important to be intentional and those like 18 to 21 years because the choices you make will really help, speak into what your years look after that.
Yeah. And I love the way you said that too. And I think that even though you can continue to develop yourself and grow into a new person or try new things later in life or even after that time period, there's such a culturally and socially accepted
Mm,
or even pressure to do that during 18 to 21. So I know a lot of our young people are kind of feeling pressure and floundering at the same time. But and you mentioned teaching students at this really important point in life. But what are you noticing that people are really struggling with? Is it purpose? Is it skills and ability? What do they usually bring to the table that they need help kind of immediately sorting out?
mhm. Yeah, I feel for young people, I feel like this is a complex time to kind of grow up in the world, mostly because there's just so much information that we're being bombarded with at all times. The internet is still very new, and I grew up before a time, this is dating myself a little bit, but I grew up at a time, smartphones came out when I was like 15, 16, and that just changed how just young people interact with the world in general. But to more directly answer your question, I think purpose is the word that comes to mind. I think a lot of the information that sometimes we encounter online could make us tempt us to feel like life is purposeless and or there's so much bad going on in the world that like our efforts aren't worth it. But you know, part of my Christian belief is understanding that God made us all for a purpose, that none of the things in the world that are happening surprise him. And what's really neat is, again, one of the things I love about my job is I get to see young people really grow out of a pivotal time in their life. And I just love seeing them come in kind of aimless, like, where am I going to go next? And then develop some confidence and better understanding of who they are in the world. And they kind of find their purpose a little bit. So that's something I kind of strive for here. It's not always easy because everybody's different, everybody has different needs. But that's kind of the first word that comes to mind because when you have purpose and your confidence in that, it gives you direction, and direction is so huge in life.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing, and I think that I can speak to, just some of the interactions that I've had the honor of having with people that I get to meet in the online space. And, I get to hear some of their stories. And so often we run into this wall of purpose and we run into this obstacle of, I'm not really sure that what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing. And, you know, I think that we if we aren't quite able to answer this question of purpose, that it won't ever actually leave us. And I think that that speaks to the reality that God created us for a purpose. and entrusted us with the abilities and curiosities and bents that we have to better serve that purpose. Um, do you feel like, or do you feel like you kind of observe that too in your students, and that you're always trying to hone them towards that and push them towards that so they can see it in themselves too?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is students, when they come and they pick a major like animation, they kind of have an idea of what they want to do, but they don't know exactly how to use their interests to really, make the most impact, really lock into a path. So, on that note, um, yeah, it's just kind of a confusing or can be a confusing age. But I try to create within my classroom a space where we can talk about anything. And most importantly, we can talk about faith. I've discovered that it is really easy to avoid kind of the faith conversation, whether you're a believer or not. But the moment you engage with the faith conversation, whether you're a believer or not, you just get those answers when it comes to purpose a whole lot faster. Um, yeah, so that's something I've observed.
So instead of shying away from it, you see value in making an environment to get to it as authentically but quickly as possible, because it helps them kind of identify more of, who they really are and why they're really doing what they're doing.
Yes, that's exactly right. Again, I think a lot of people, want to make a difference today. They want to figure out how they fit in. And there's a lot of answers for what that could be like online. Like, if you're popular enough, if you have enough money, that'll kind of fill that void, that'll give you your purpose. But I think there's enough examples for us to like glance at today that shows that's not the case. There's so many people who have found fame, so many people who have found money, so many people who have found even, the person they supposedly thought was the love of their life. And like all those things could be good, but they don't give all the answers. They don't answer that purpose question I'd answer. And so when you lean into spirituality, I find people get to that answer a whole lot faster.
Yeah, I really feel like I've seen that in actually so many creators, like for example on YouTube that I've been following for maybe 5 or 10 years or something. They've had wild success, millions of followers now, and then they just sort of disappeared. Or
Mm,
they came back a little bit different, and they've kind of all said something along this line of, I found something that became doable and lucrative, but I realized that it was not really in line with my purpose. And so it became a burden. And yet I was doing it anyways. And it totally burned me out. And so now I didn't care what I was walking away from. I just wanted to walk away from it. And then within that, too, I see an uptick of people, then those same people turning around and looking for their purpose and looking for why, who am I really, and why do I do what I do? And am I comfortable with that, or do I want to change it? And what's great about that, in my opinion, is I've seen so many of these creators start to share their faith journey and start to share that, kind of like in Ecclesiastes, I looked around, I accomplished all this, and I realized it was pointless, and I need God. That's what I came away with. So I think it's really cool, and so important and necessary to help somebody get there on the front end of their potential career or life, really, because we talk about career, which is a very Western, very which isn't a bad thing, but very like U.S. merit based a goal and accomplishment. But if we sit with the Lord, He says that our purpose is to honor and glorify Him, um, and everything else flows from that. So, um, so important. And I'm wondering, how do you invite someone to consider God without making each student feel like a project? Um,
yes. So one of the things I'm going to give God credit that God's taught me over the past decade or so is if you want to make a difference in somebody's life, one of the best things you can do is ask questions and listen. And the reason that was really impactful to me is you kind of get the feel growing up that the opposite is true. Like the world makes it seems like if you're loud and if you're confident, like that's how you like make change. And sometimes, can be loud and it does make a change. But if I want to make a real impact on someone, if I ask them thoughtful questions, specifically ones that I think will relate to where they're at in their journey, they begin to reflect a lot. And I think when you can help people get into that reflective mode, sometimes the Holy Spirit can kind of show up in those moments and help kind of nudge and guide in the right direction. So I think God's given me a gift for listening. Find people fascinating, and so I'm more than happy to listen. And when people are, they want to share or are going through something. But yeah, listening, and then what was the other word I shared just a second ago? Um, yeah, just kind of encouraging and asking the right questions, I think makes more of a difference than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, that relational space, relational curiosity.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I love that. And I think of the women at the well, right? That Jesus started with this relational curiosity and then said, well, actually, I do know you. And that's what the Holy Spirit does when we join in those conversations. So I love that. Um, and then, we didn't really talk about this yet, but you do have the privilege of working at a Christian university, yet it's not all of the students that attend are professing Christians. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'd wager that where I work, maybe 40% of our students are believers, and about 60% would not. They may say they believe in God, but I don't. I think that's different than, claiming Christ as Lord and Savior.
Yes. And so many students probably have had the opportunity to hear about God or be exposed, but then there's that personal step that is obviously the one that God's always calling us into. And, have there been instances where it has kind of presented maybe as more like an obstacle that um, the creative things that you want to direct them in and even want to come alongside them in, they've demonstrated a little bit of resistance once they kind of understand your Christian leaning or how serious you are about your faith?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Um, I think when I reflect on my time here, because most of our students realize this is a Christian institution, I'll get a good education here, but the teachers there are going to, be followers of Christ. I think they come in with an understanding already that like I'm going to be open with my faith, never force my ideas on anyone. Um, and so for the most part, I haven't dealt with a lot of, we'll call it combativeness when
Mm.
it comes to what we believe here at this university. I say the few examples is, I teach animation. We make a lot of animation here. Sometimes we'll get some story pitches that, you know, maybe aren't 100% God honoring. The student is more interested in expressing themselves in kind of like an edgy way, and I understand it. Art is for expression. But for the most part of our agreement here is when we make art, say within the context of a classroom, we want it to, at the very bare minimum, reflect truth. So we tell all kinds of stories here. Like we do thrillers, we'll do action, we'll do romance. But I like to start on again that question: does it reflect truth? If it does, we can kind of work there. I might kind of nudge them in a direction, but I love giving students an opportunity to express themselves through original stories. But again, if they are just trying to be edgy for edginess sake, there are just certain topics we stay away from. Um, and I've only had to nudge students in that direction a couple of times. Again, a lot of them come in understanding what some of our priorities are.
Well, that's really good. Um, and interestingly, within that, it has been my perception of creatives that they see the world differently. My husband said it really well about our daughter, who's an artist. She was just able to produce this image from this perspective that, and we watched her draw it. It was just a way that we couldn't even think about it happening, and yet here she was, just able to zero in and do the thing. Um, and artists are always seeing things differently and pursuing things in a way that they know will work, even if it's an unconventional or a testing of the limits or testing of the boundaries. And so we have some really interesting discussions around here about what boundaries does God want us to understand and weigh, but not necessarily test, as in go beyond. And I think it's so important for creatives to be able to have the opportunity to have a handle on what is really truth. And there is a thought and discussion in classical art that beauty is truth. Beauty is the expression of truth, and that beauty is actually not subjective as it pertains to truth and virtue. And do you observe that? Okay, here's how I want to ask this. Have you observed a change in a student who came in maybe unsure about either their purpose or faith, but as they were able to walk out those things, being exposed to truth and equipped with the skills that your school is providing them, have they been able to hone more their ability to communicate truth and virtue?
Yeah. So I am in a very privileged situation where I have a lot of say with not only how my classes go, but how the whole animation department is kind of run. And so since I got here, I've slowly tried to create an environment where, yes, everybody grows as an artist, their skills improve, but I really want them to grow as people. And I think there are ways I can run my class that provide that opportunity. Um, just so I'm answering your question specifically, what was the specific question?
So, as someone grows in their
Mhm.
exposure to truth and they develop more skills,
That's right.
have they demonstrated more of an ability to communicate virtue and beauty in their storytelling?
So when I think of art, I think art is a lot of things. I think a really important thing that art is that we overlook is a mode of communication. Yes, we're expressing, but we're also communicating something specific. If you communicate your idea well, it's usually well received. You can make whatever you want, but if your decisions when it comes to communication are, we'll say, a little rough, your message just isn't going to get across as well as you want. So through practicing their craft, illustrating better, understanding how the world works better. I think a fun thing about animation is some professionals have dubbed it the illusion of life, where in many ways we're just trying to recreate, as you kind of hinted at, what's beautiful about the world. That's an animator's job. Can we recreate what's actually true and what's beautiful about the world? So I like to think that they grow in that particular department and their ability to create and reflect what's true and beautiful. But also, by the time they graduate, they should have had plenty of opportunities to do some deep thinking. We have like discussions in our class where I'll ask them some hard hitting questions and try to create an environment where people are comfortable speaking their mind. And through I think having enough of those conversations and through hopefully even being exposed to our student body, um, yeah, I think that communication is strengthened by the time they graduate. You can tell the difference between a freshman project and a senior project. Um, and I plant the seeds so that can hopefully happen.
Wow, that's really cool. And so would you say that students kind of respond differently to that lived faith and that modeled communication more than just, lectures or arguments or, a syllabus?
Yeah, I think it's the balance. Something that I find fun about my job is every year I get to reflect on the previous year and be like, okay, what worked really well? What did students respond well to? And what can I tweak a little bit just to get a little bit more out of this particular class? Um, I think it's all about finding a balance, like a lot of things in life. There does need to be a little bit of lecture just because students do need to hear from those who are just have more experience in the specific field and are a little bit more knowledgeable. But what my classes might be a little different than others where I'm not lecture heavy. I might talk to the class for, 30 minutes, 40 minutes tops if we're not critiquing. For a majority of my classes, I love critiques where the students can talk. In my opinion, to grow as an artist, you have to know how to talk about artists. I learned this early on. I met so many people who are really talented and just would blow your mind with what they can do, but then they're quiet and they don't speak unless they're spoken to. And I'm like, hey, yo, I love you, but if you want to go far in this field, you have to be able to like talk about art. People will. hold you in higher regard when you can talk in an informed way about your craft. Um, so I really try to make sure they get a chance to talk. Critiques are a great way to do that. And then lab. Just like the best way to build muscle is not to watch a bunch of lectures on working out. Eventually, you have to lift the weights. Uh, I make a lot of I like to compare sports and art a lot because I think they're more similar than people think. The more you practice a sport, the more you will get better. You may not be NBA ready, but you'll get a lot better. And I think art is the exact same way. And so I try to provide time in the classroom to, lift a few weights or get the drawing in they need to see that improvement. So it's a balance between kind of those three.
Yeah, I love what you said there because sports and art, there's so much about excellence. And I think that there's a really big difference between talent or even inclination and talent combined with discipline. Um, because, well, I say to my children, for example, which I'm sure you communicate as well in your classroom, is that, discipline shows up when motivation doesn't. Um, and competency produces more enjoyment of what you're doing. And so, um, would you say that, like, how do I want to say that? Okay. Are there Christians or even yeah, okay, I'm just going to dive in. I'm just going to do it. Are
Do
there
it.
Christians who can, do you think, are there ways that Christians can unintentionally damage their witness by expecting their beliefs or their good intentions to compensate for being unprepared or for producing unreliable or subpar work? In other words,
Ooh.
trying to ride on just the Christian label instead of showing up with excellence.
Yeah, so something that I think is so interesting within kind of we'll say ministries around the world is I think most ministries would recognize the importance of reaching people. Um, Okay, I'll start from this angle. Jesus was a storyteller. Jesus told a number of parables. Jesus could have like helped people grow to know him and God by exclusively doing miracles, and that would have wowed people enough. But there are several times throughout the New Testament that where he stopped and he told a story. And those stories have been read for like thousands of years, obviously since he was here. And I think that's significant. The Bible is a collection of stories. I really like reflecting on that. God could have witnessed to us in any way. He could have, maybe the way he communicated to people is exclusively through dreams. That would be a very different world to live in where, in our dreams, God talks to us. But he decided not to do that. He said, I'm going to give them a story that, has historical records of what happens, but then also, it just makes it easier to follow the narrative of like the impact Jesus had. Um, all of that is right in front of us in ministries. But then when we approach like films and books and TV. There are exceptions that I think are exceptional, but I think the church really struggles when it comes to art. And I think that's so fascinating. Um, at the same time, I choose to see that as an area for opportunity. Um, I don't know if you have strong opinions on old shows like VeggieTales. I grew up with VeggieTales. It was really fun for the time. At the very least, it got us familiar with certain Bible studies before we picked up a Bible ourselves. But that was well received. And I think we could have so many shows and movies and media that just resonate with people at a really unique level. If we, embrace the potential that art has. So I guess that's kind of a long-winded way of saying yes. um, I think the potential to create art that glorifies God and pushes people towards Him is immense. I do think that certain people will not be willing to go the lengths needed to create great stories or great art that has that particular impact.
Yeah, I love what you said there. Do you think, kind of putting you on the spot question, do you think that one of the reasons that the church may struggle with good storytelling or with excellent art is because they're overly critical of the story being told?
I'm going to guess that, like a lot of things in the world, it's a multifaceted issue. It probably doesn't boil down to like, here's the reason why stories are a little bit tougher to tell, in the way we see a lot of ministries today. Um, yeah, I think I've had a chance to work with churches. I grew up in the church and all that. I've lived in like 3 different states, so naturally I've like attended 5 to 6 different churches. A lot of them are great. A lot of them I love my time there, but I have noticed that there is this trend to, there's one right way to do everything. Um, Now, the God I know, I think is super fascinating and creative. And when you read the Bible, I'd argue God almost doesn't solve the same problem the same way twice.
Mm.
Every time like an issue shows up, God kind of catches everybody by surprise. Well, here's how I'm going to resolve this one this time. I love that about God. I think that's a little bit harder for certain people who like grew up in certain church environments, and that's okay. God still uses us. But I think there's a number of reasons, including like tradition, that makes it hard to really truly pull out the potential of storytelling.
Yes. I was pre-Veggie Tales, gonna date myself here. um, and I remember thinking when I watched my very first Veggie Tales, what are we doing? This is crazy animation. This is wild. But the heart of it was just this big goofball entertainment kind of wrapped up in this wholesome reality. And then, of course, after I came to know the Lord, I realized, whoa, there's a lot of, biblical truth or biblical pointing at least in here. And so at a point, VeggieTales, I think, was successful because it didn't hyper focus on being anything more than what it really was intended to be, which was a playful introduction and an
Yeah,
invitation.
that's it. Yeah. I
Um,
also really respect them for like, I think they were very intentional before the founder, Bill Fisher, sadly had to, give up the VeggieTale property. But when the founder was a part of it, they never, Jesus isn't in VeggieTales. And I think that was intentional. I don't think they wanted to run even the risk of like miscommunicating who Jesus is by making him a carrot. So there was some thoughtfulness, even if, maybe they missed the mark here and there. But I love the playful introduction. I think that's what they were aiming for.
yeah, and I wonder too, as I watch certain productions and things, dating myself again, another one of my early, what am I trying to say? Entertainment introductions to Christianity, aside from Superbook, which no one's allowed to talk about because it's awesome, um, was The Passion of the Christ. And that filmmaking and that storytelling, I have so many opinions on. I had opinions on it then. I have opinions before I was a believer, and I have opinions on it now that I am a believer. And yet, the bold invitation that story had was a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, people talk about it as life changing. Just being invited into the story in a way that maybe they would not have been before. Maybe they really wouldn't have picked up a Bible before. And that's one of the powers of creating art that communicates well. And I just wonder as well, how we go from this, if you would say, essentially controversial, heavy hitting, even dark telling of what Jesus went through bodily to be able to save your soul. How we go from that to, a Kendrick Brothers movie that's good and has a lot of good messaging, but at times can feel like it's directed solely at the church and lands solely with the church. And where is the line where that storytelling gets encouraged for the Christian creative? Should they limit themselves to Christian stories only? Or should the Christian creative aim to be in every space and glorify God in it?
Yeah. I've thought about what you're talking about right now a lot. I'm going to do everything in my power to give you my short version. I think one of the churches, just my opinion, biggest mistakes right now is whenever, you know, they want to fund a new Christian project, they remake a Bible story. Now, I want to live in a world where we can have both, where we remake Bible stories that are, biblically accurate. I also think that there is kind of a hunger right now um, for meaningful, true stories that are fictional, but like really just glorify God and point to truth. Again, I mentioned earlier that Jesus was a storyteller. The stories he told were fiction. He kind of made stuff up, um, but the stuff he created via story changed the disciples' lives, changed his followers' lives, still changed lives today. Um, so I'm hoping to wake up in a world one day when ministries around the world recognize, you know what, we can tell stories that just like point to God. And I don't know, I think that's how you start a revival right there. Just have a slew of stories that like point to God and get people interested in His truth.
Yeah, I really love that perspective because I think it's the difference between getting up on a stage with the microphone and intention to give a sermon versus inviting someone to coffee.
Yeah, that's a fun way to put it too.
That would be kind of maybe a fun story, like seeing a preacher like throughout the week. What does he do for the rest of the week? Is he going to coffee with people? Is he just helping people for the sake of it? Is he showing up in people's lives?
I
Anyway.
mean, even with your comment, like I can't think of a film, and I'm sure it exists on some platform somewhere, that like follows the life of a pastor. I know pastors. That is like one of the hardest occupations you can have in life, period. Um, it looks glamorous on that stage. Um, Nobody is critiqued, in my opinion, harder than a pastor and is faced with weirder issues than a pastor. Like, what an amazing story that could be to find just to follow a pastor who like is faced with hardship but like perseveres. um Maybe it exists. I don't know. So
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, immediately what comes to mind is I feel like God's Not Dead, that series. I feel like it kind of plays a little bit with some of those stories. You kind of follow this one pastor to a degree, and he's got moments of great faith and then moments of cynicism or struggle and real hardship. But I agree, that is a story that really could and should be told because that's a human story. I mean, even I get his name wrong. It's Richard Dawkins. He's a British atheist. Even he said, I think that's right. Even he said that he wants to live in a culturally Christian society. He would prefer to live in a Christian society versus an Eastern society or some of the values that come from non-Western society, which he acknowledges is based in Christian values. And so, if we're going to humanize Christianity, why would a pastor's story not be one of the most perfect places to start? So,
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
um, so when I think about um, what is really required to even get the opportunity to tell your stories, you first have to develop those skills, right? And that's there's more that goes into developing skills than just receiving instruction or doing the work. And what kinds of things do you typically find that you're privileged to get to lead people in to further develop themselves? You mentioned communication, and I imagine within that you're also meaning some being able to receive helpful criticism. But what other things are students really needing to develop to understand what it means to step into the world of art and creatives and production, and to even have a space, regardless of whether or not they're a believer?
yeah. That's a really good question too. So something I became obsessed with just a couple years ago is the idea or the role soft skills play in life. And the reason I became a little obsessed with it was because I just went through the first 27, 28 years of my life, and I just felt like it was never brought up. And then I heard it brought up, and I was like, oh my word, I see this everywhere, including in my own life. For those who aren't familiar, hard skills are like, drawing is a hard skill, doing math and, Being able to balance budgets is a hard skill. What's another example of a hard skill? Construction, working on a car. Those are all hard skills. But soft skill includes stuff like persistence, communication, time management, adaptability, your ability to work with a team, problem solving. This stuff is incredibly valuable. Um, so much so that I started dedicating a segment of my junior and senior classes where we would like start every class just talking about soft skills for 10 to 15 minutes. And I did see a lot of fruit from that at the end of the year, which was really, really cool. I think another reason this is really compelling to me, I didn't talk a ton about like how I got my start just yet, but I did not grow up drawing. I made a few comics in like middle school when I was younger, but I didn't draw. And then I woke up at 18 and decided I wanted to study animation with like no drawing background. So I showed up at college. I was easily the worst student in my class, or maybe the second worst student in my class. But I didn't really care because I was determined, and I just decided year one, I'm going to work harder than anybody on this in this room. So even though I started off at a really, really low point, I was able to just stay focused, hone my craft, work harder than the rest of my peers, and I was able to catch up to a lot of them in a reasonably quick manner, and then was really happy with my trajectory beyond that. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up now is because I didn't have the hard skills initially. I attribute a lot of what success I have had to soft skills. I've always been a very confident person. I love learning and I love like problem solving and adapting. And I love people. And so I'm like naturally inclined to find ways to improve my communication. So my theory is because I really went all in with my soft skills pretty early, I was rewarded with that. I share this with my students. For the first 10 or so years of my career, I barely applied to a job. A lot of this was like God's divine guidance. But every time I needed like a new job, somebody would come to me and be like, "Hey, are you looking for work?" And I would just be like, "Yeah, I can work with you." But I think it's because I was able to prove myself at some point to that person. Christian is somebody who I could see myself working with. When the opportunity arose, they reached out to me. And a lot of that came from soft skills. So I want my students to have that same opportunity, regardless of where their drawing or their 3D modeling or character animation is at. If they are just exceptional people, great communicators with leadership potential, people see that, people remember that, and that opens a lot of doors. So I'm trying to find clever ways to incorporate soft skill building in a lot of my classes.
Yeah, that's so fascinating and amazing because I feel like that is an expression of God's moral realities, right? Because he made us um heart, mind, body, um and soul, and we are not just one layer, and working with someone is not just based on their talent, right? And you would say that, would you say that talent can be undermined by, poor communication or unreliability, or just a kind of cantankerous personality?
Yeah. So another reason I'm so passionate about the soft skills thing is I'm in a really fun season of life where I've had the opportunity to develop some original cartoons. So this started almost 3 years ago now. I received a grant to really make whatever I wanted. Animation pilots are really popular online right now. There's honestly kind of a renaissance happening in animation, and it's kind of slow, but it's really interesting if you look at some of the breakout successes that are happening online right now. Anyway, I had a chance to make an animated pilot. I decided to hire some of the students and recent graduates who I thought had a lot of potential, and I just worked with them. I was able to pay them and everything. The first year, went well, but I'd say the most important lesson I learned is I couldn't just hire people I liked. There are some people that I like who are very skillful, who, I'll put it this way, really need to develop their soft skills, really just need to be more professional. That made my life a little bit harder just because they weren't as timely and reliable as they could be. Since then, I've been able to make two more episodes. And this year, I'm working on episode three, and it's gone the best so far. And I think A, it's because I learned a lot the first 2 years. B, I was very selective with who I chose to work with. And again, yes, I'm working with talented people, but I'm working with people who, in my opinion, are very professional, or at the very least, value professionalism. Um, so it's not flashy. It's not what like a lot of young people like to hear. But if you invest in learning to be professional early, that will pay off because people pay attention to that sort of thing.
Yeah, praise God. That is so cool to me because obviously I'm a homeschool mom. I care so much about my children and their development. And my husband and I had the conviction very early on by the Lord's leading that we needed to include intentional character study and
Mm,
development in our children. And I heard a quote somewhere, but I can never find it. So maybe someone on the interwebs can find it for us. That said, if you train a man in mind and not morals, you will raise but clever devils. And that has always stuck with me. So hopefully I didn't just make it up somewhere, combine ideas or something, but I feel like it works. And I think if there ever really were days, they are very quickly going where someone can just show up with talent or name or fame alone and skate on that indefinitely.
mm,
And I even think of some creatives that I've just learned about recently. I mean, this is always unfortunately a reality, I guess, but that I just learned about recently who kind of imploded because their own character, you know, was not developed in such a way that they could thrive and continue to thrive. And um, who is it that said that you kind of live and die by your systems, um,
mm.
your sayings and your systems? So I really love that you're taking the time to do that. And do you have you observed that that is also somewhat of a segue or an opportunity to demonstrate your faith and the reality of the impact that God has had on you to develop you in this way and show you the value of emulating, because even when we say godly character, um, some people might their ears might shut down, but when you start reframing it with different language but you mean the same thing, you say
Yeah.
professionalism, right? But we only think it's professional because it's how God made our minds to want to interact together.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so true. So part of me being so amped up about this is a little bit of a double-edged sword because if they hear me talk, oh, Mr. Washington saying that I need to, be a good problem solver and communicate well, all of a sudden they're watching me twice as close to see if I'm actually communicating well and a team player and all of that. So that is a reality. I do think that it's also an opportunity. I think, like, I have a little 3-year-old now, and it is so fascinating watching him just observe me and his mom and like emulate us. And like you hear about this maybe as a teenager, but then when you have a little person who like is straight up copying you, that's just an eye opener because you made that person, and you can't point to anybody but yourself. They're not even going to school yet. Um, but yeah, I think it's to a lesser degree true in college. If like you are someone who has a reputation, who has I don't know. We'll just say reputation. People want to see, okay, how did he earn that reputation? Is he legit? And if you are perceived as legitimate, they'll incorporate some of those skills. I think another eye-opening moment I had. I just talked about my 3-year-old who was, would sometimes copy me. I love to give my students an opportunity to teach. Say if they're a teacher assistant for one of my class or something, and I won't say her name, but one girl was TAing for me. She taught a lecture, and she would use some of the exact same phrases I would use in like a daily basis on a lecture. I felt like I was watching like a slight mirror of my own like teaching um just habits. So yeah, people are always watching, specifically if they feel like there's any true value to take away. Um, and I'm trying to use that as an opportunity. I just have to make sure I'm always on my P's and Q's.
Yeah, and I think that's so wise too. You mentioned earlier that, pastors and teachers, they are under more scrutiny than anyone, right? And in a very real sense, you fall under that category, right? As teacher, and especially, you add in the layer of talking to people about their character and about the fact that you derive your character from the Lord, you've just put so many spotlights on you. And you're asking people to allow you to be an influence, a real influence into their life. And so, in many ways, that was why the title of today's episode really like stood out to me as my husband and I were talking about what it would be, just the influence that you've been given. So really admire the way that you take that so seriously, and all the practical ways that God has allowed your mind to see that play out, and to be able to meet the students exactly where they're at and with what they need, even if you don't realize it, just by your example.
Yeah, I mean, it helps too if God's blessed you with the examples, because I was the exact same way when I was at home. I looked up to my dad, maybe not consciously. He's like, oh, he's just my dad, but like, he was the first example of like what a man would look like in my life. And then when I got to college, I think everybody needs mentors at some point in time, whether you're female or male or what have you. Um, but yeah, I had different mentors in college, and that was really pivotal for the time. So, one thing I really hope for young people is that they all can find mentors that they can relate to at some point in their life. I think we currently live in a time where it's actually a little bit hard to find a good, worthwhile mentor. A, people are always busy. B, if you go back just a little over 100 years ago, we used to have this thing called like apprenticeships, or it was honestly just easier to get a job in general. And I think there were a lot of apprenticeship, like mentorship opportunities then. Now it feels like there's a lot less incentive to step out of your comfort zone, step out of your room. But that's the only way you're going to find a mentor who can honestly make a big impact in your life. So hopefully the church steps in there. I think the church can and should. We just have to figure out what that looks like for this generation.
Yeah, and do you feel like the church kind of meets young creatives where they're at, or do you agree with this sentiment? When our daughter demonstrated and was showing off some of her art at a young age, 13 or something, maybe 12. One of the first things she started with, of course, was those anime art forms, body forms, face forms. And she got a little bit of unwelcome reception. But this man approached us at church and said, "Can I pray over you guys?" And I'm so thankful that as Christian parents, you're encouraging your obviously talented daughter towards this art form, because he said the church doesn't always know what to do with creatives, but God needs you, so keep going. So it,
Yeah, I mean,
go
just
ahead.
like you said, just a little bit of encouragement can go a long way. Um, Artists really thrive when they're in environments that allow them to thrive. The internet is not one of those places. You can find a small circle that will encourage you, but for the most part, anything that's posted today is met with criticism first and foremost. And I really kind of think that's a shame. I think that's one of the reasons why locations like the school I work are really helpful. We create an environment where people can grow healthily and receive encouragement and therefore reach their full potential just a little bit faster. But again, I think the church can and should do that. I think for that to happen, and we kind of discussed this already, certain churches just need to understand the value that artists do bring. It's amazing to me. I think most families or most people, they go to work listening to music or a podcast, and I'd honestly consider podcasting an art form. And then they, in the evening, they'll watch a show, they'll watch a movie, they'll basically engage with art. So a lot of people's days literally will start with art, and in some capacity, maybe they pick up a book, ends with art, but we don't really value it to the degree I think that it could be valued. So yeah.
I completely agree, 100%. Um, you look around and everything is art and design. Everything has an element of creativity. Even when things have more strict rules or boundaries like architecture, it still starts with an idea, a creative idea. And if we squash that, I don't think that's how we're intended to operate within the world. God is creative, and He gives that to us. And I've actually observed that even a non-creative actually does have creativity within them. They just have to, like you said, come into an environment where that can be fostered,
Mm,
and where their creativity can be identified and brought out.
yeah, completely. Um, in I don't want to say in the church's defense, but
Mhm.
uh, to I do want to just acknowledge that art can be a little bit hard to quantify and fully understand. Um, the more I grow as an artist and interact with artists, like there's no straight path to art. Yes, you can follow a strategy, but the best art comes from like self-reflection, and comes from like this really interesting or complex intangible search. So even the show I'm working on right now, or really any idea I pursue, my best ideas come when I like sit in silence. Um, and I think that's interesting too. Maybe that's where God, through the Holy Spirit, can inspire me the most. That could be it. It could be a number of things. But yeah, art is just it's just hard to quantify. And so if you haven't engaged with art yourself and you meet someone who like comes up with these ideas seemingly out of anywhere, and then you can't immediately identify how much value does this have because a lot of people haven't been able to interact with it just yet. I do understand how it's complex.
Oh yeah. Um, and I absolutely think that given the right environment and opportunity, the churches really do want to support the people that are, part of their gathering and part of their flock, if you will. They just might not always fully understand what their local artist really needs from them. And can you think of any examples where, either in your own personal life or something you've seen in a student's experience, where a church has just really supported and come alongside in a way that helped them to flourish?
Oh yes, 100%. So I used to go to this church. It met at a high school, which I think is funny to this day. But it was a really, really good church until they got their own building eventually. Anyway, there was a guy there, and he animation was his passion, right? He didn't necessarily get a degree in animation, but he's like, I love this stuff, so I'm just going to work on it. Uh, Apparently, part of his testimony is somebody found out he made animation. He's like, oh, that's really cool. Um, I want you to share with the congregation about like what you're doing. And so he just said yes. And so a few weeks later, he's standing up in front of his church, in front of hundreds of people and sharing what he's doing. And then from that opportunity, I think, I like to think people were blessed that day of, but he was approached later and he's like, hey, I see you do really cool stuff. Would you ever, like, I'd love to hire you to work on, this and that project. And now I don't know how much animation he does, but I do know that his full-time career is art. His
Wow.
full-time career is media. Um, and while I can't say like that's the full picture of how he got to where he is, he shared very openly that like that was affirming to him, and that's how God's using him now.
That is so cool. Especially for some reason, it's really cool to me that there's an element of talent and hard work and willingness to be vulnerable in the artistic space that can open doors for you. It's not always and only pursuing formal education, although that, of course, is highly valued and should be pursued, especially for the person who, I mean, I think all of us always benefit from more instruction, right? Oh, you're good at this. Great. Now, if I give you this and this and this, you'll be a well rounded person who can interact well. Um, that's so cool, though. Um, so, when it comes to discipling a creative, you think a church would really benefit from encouragement and opportunity, and sometimes just supporting them in what they're doing, maybe not saying like, "Oh, I see you have a talent in this. How about you come be our media team as a volunteer?"
Yeah, if we're looking at, open blue skies, I think it would be really smart for a lot of churches to straight up just invest in an art ministry. I think a lot of churches, I think that would thrive, to be honest, both within the existing congregation as well as maybe attracting some people slightly outside the church. And if you're wondering what would an art ministry do, maybe you come up with projects and or activities that they can do that either allows them to explore their own faith in a new way, or that could turn into an exhibit of some sort that you invite people to. I think that is really interesting. I think as long as you had a good people kind of heading it up, it would not be that difficult. This type of ministry could meet once a month, maybe twice a month. And I think a lot of fruit could come from that. Uh, you just would need people to really kind of put that on their shoulders, I think, for it to actually happen.
Yeah, praise God. I wonder if that could be something where some dedicated people or students could lead people in, okay, well, let me show you this. Let me share with you this story that Jesus told. And why don't you create something out of that? Do you hear sheep in this? Do you hear talent? What does talent mean to you? Of course, it has a meaning, but how would you express that that could be a really interesting opportunity for people to kind of get on different levels and layers with interacting with scripture in a way they might not have thought to before.
Yes, I completely think that could be the case.
That's so cool. But what kind of spiritual dangers do you think are kind of common for the creative professional that maybe the church would benefit from thinking of ahead of time to be able to pray over the people that might be in their lives that they could support?
So you're asking what kind of spiritual dangers artists in specific might encounter?
Yeah, like artists, especially someone who's pursuing art professionally and may even walk into an environment that is not explicitly Christian, right? Or be called to interact in a space as a Christian, but not working on Christian projects.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. A lot of, at least the animation industry, there are more animation-based studios, but I'd still say they're the minority, not the majority. I think really the best way to prepare for something like that is to take the steps of just understanding, hey, what is this calling actually? Like, are you here to just draw? Or like, do you want to use this passion you have to make more of an impact? Um, and so, if you can use your artistic abilities to very strictly tell um, God honoring stories, that's great. I can see some people having opportunity to work for, say, maybe like a Netflix show, and maybe the Netflix show isn't pagan per se. It's not glorifying things that are evil, but it's just a regular kid show, right? Some kids hang out with their friends, they goof off. Hopefully, not problematic. In that environment, oh, okay. So a few weeks ago, my pastor said something that really, really stuck with me. He said that God loves us, and one of the best ways to show God that we love Him is by like loving other people. So whether you're an artist or in a different career, by simply jumping on the job and loving people and doing your job well and giving God credit, I think that that is still really, really meaningful. Because, like we talked about earlier, people are always watching. And if people know you're a Christian and you always give 110%, um, and you love the people well in that environment, I think that's its own testimony. So that's maybe how I would look at how to prepare for that kind of environment.
A really great perspective. So true, too. Um, just going back again to that shepherding and that witness. And then also, I really love that you pointed out, maybe you don't want to land on a pagan project that's totally being antithetical to your values. And I'm sure there's a truth and a reality to you have likely trained up students that don't profess those values while they're with you. They don't profess those values even after, or after they leave. But that seed was planted because of the discipleship that you offered them through your example, through your teaching, through your conversations. And so, would you say that for the church, that there is typically a healthier response with anyone in their community, but particularly the creatives in their community, if they're offered consistent, loving discipleship?
So you ask, just so I understand your question correctly, again, what can the church do for artists in particular, just to kind of help them reach that full potential?
Well, as a kind of ward off for some of the struggles or um, stepping into things that maybe they ought not to, is kind of that ounce of prevention or that effort of discipleship from the church outward
Okay.
towards them, particularly impactful in their trajectory for just being able to confidently honor and glorify God with their choices.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it is interesting when I look at some of the students who really thrive in my classroom. They're the ones who are a part of our Bible study. We have a student led Bible study. They meet every week. The student leaders are like advised by our campus pastor. So there is some guidance there. But when I look into who shows up to that student Bible study, a lot of them are the ones who take their work seriously and are always trying to honor God in and outside of the classroom, and it reflects in their work. So I imagine that the church could serve a similar function, um, and yeah, just meet artists where they're at. Maybe ask. Sometimes I wonder how often the certain ministries ask people what they need. Um, because like we talked about earlier, simply asking and just understanding those you're trying to serve can go a long ways too.
Yeah, praise God. Have you encountered students that thought they were starting in art, but kind of in the school developed more of an interest and deeper skills elsewhere? So they realized that their God-given gift wasn't necessarily going to turn into a career in what they were there to study for.
Yeah, let's see. How much do I speak into this?
Right.
So here's the thing about higher ed. It's really, really interesting. I'll just be really, really honest with you guys. I like when people are honest with me. So
Yeah.
if you do some research, I think there is an interesting percentage. It might be anywhere from 20 to 30 percentage of college graduates across the board. Um, may not stick with what they studied in college for the rest of their life. Usually they'll make connections, they network, they develop new interests, and sometimes their career takes them in different directions. At the same time, there are also studies that show that people who do complete their college experience make more over the course of their lifetime. So that tells me two things are happening. One, um, college is invaluable, and that if it's done right, you should gain the confidence and the skill sets to allow you to navigate a number of different careers over the course of your life, and there should be a reward. But two, people change and evolve, and even if you start off with an interest at 18, 19, if at 30 you're like, I don't love this as much as I used to, or actually I think God's calling me in this direction, like that's okay. As a matter of fact, that's pretty standard. Um, so when I went to university, my goal was I'll hopefully work at some studios. Maybe I'll make some cartoons. Now, I've had a chance to do a degree of that, and that's neat. But in this season of life, like I love teaching. I didn't start off in this direction, but me going the route I did through the university I did still brought me to the right place. So I said a lot of things that I think were related to your question.
Yeah.
But I like just the transparency of like there's a lot of value that comes from college at the same time that lives with the reality that people change careers over the course of their life. And like that's super duper normal.
Yeah, and I think that there's really something to be said about the holistic experience, the mentorship, the environment in which to assess your skills and to assess your gaps, whether they're in the practical or the hard skills or the soft skills, and all of those kind of raise up. It is, I think you said it really well earlier, actually. In a way, college is quite like modern apprenticeship. It's the closest thing that we have, with the exception of a few professions where that's still absolutely the model.
Yeah. And I think rite of passage is not only one of my favorite kind of stories, but it's just something you see throughout life. Let me think if I can see if I can think of another example of rite of passage. So when family brings a new baby into their life, like I guess I'm about to, that's in a sense a rite of passage. It is really kind of difficult in a season, specifically like the delivery, and even some of the weeks after the delivery can be challenging. But man, is the reward beyond that great. I think that rites of passage. And again, they can come from a number of different places. It doesn't just have to be university, but I think to a degree that needs to happen as students are in, as young people are entering into adulthood. Um, I just see that pattern in a lot of different places in life, and I think, yeah, that's just what I want for the people who come through here as well.
That's really so amazing. And I see it a lot more now. I'm kind of personally, I'll just be totally straightforward with you. I'm kind of personally college, neutral. I think it's good for some
Right.
people, and I think it's not necessarily good for other people. But thinking more through all that it develops in a person or could have the potential to develop in a person um, really actually shifts the question to not should you go to college, but should you, or what college should you go to? Being more intentional and more thoughtful about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm again, it can look so many different ways in different people's lives. I think what's cool about living in today is there are a lot of interesting choices that maybe didn't exist a couple of decades ago. Um, but yeah, you got to use your network, ask lots of questions, do lots of research. I'm so excited when I meet young people who are like, this is what I want to do. And these are all the different angles I realize I can approach it. Like that makes me really excited. Because even if they don't end up in my classroom, I know that they've laid the groundwork to continue their personal development. And again, I personally think that's really important in this season.
Yeah, I love that so much. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about storytelling. I really liked some of the things that you had to say, and I'm still very curious about this. I'm very curious about should Christian art or art produced by Christians always have an explicitly Christian message?
Hmm. So personally, I think it should, but as we've alluded to earlier, I think good stories convey something that's true. And the way I understand truth is something that points to a reality that God has established in the world we live in. So I like to use silly analogies like this. Like if anybody made a story that was all, and the theme was, hey, if you drink less water, you'll be healthier. People will be like, what are you talking about? That's bizarre. Or if you break a bone once a year, you'll be better off. Again, people be like, that's insane. But that's, the opposite of that, conveying things that are true, like that's where the impact exists. We don't want to waste our time with tomfoolery and lies. We want to use stories to understand the human experience better. I'd also argue that stories are so important because people don't like to be lectured. It doesn't matter if you are 3, 4, 5, a teenager, 50, 80, 90. There's just something about being human where like we don't like being micromanaged and controlled. But what's even if the person trying to convince you is correct. But what's incredible about stories, if they have this way of communicating important truths emotionally that are really hard to argue against, specifically if they point to truth. So the whole reason I personally got into storytelling is I encountered some stories through books, to be honest, through video games, through
Yeah.
movies that just made me look at the world different and just I felt gave me a better understanding of what it meant to be human. And I didn't feel like I was lectured by those books or those video games. I was just getting a perspective that was insightful. Um, so, from that perspective, I think stories by their very design should be honoring to God, but it shouldn't be a lecture. It shouldn't be a this is the way you must think. It should let me take you on a journey that helps us both understand the human experience a bit more.
Yeah, I really, really love that. I'm so curious now, though. Um, what video games in particular kind of stand out to you in your memory
Oh man.
that told good stories?
Yeah, you learn a lot about a person based off of what they read and what games they play.
True.
I'd say some of the most influential games I played when I was younger. Um, I liked party games like Super Mario and Mario Kart and all of those. Those are fun with friends exclusively. But if I wasn't playing with friends, I almost exclusively played story-based games. So games that had a narrative. I felt I got the most reward from those. If I'm also honest, I played a lot of Japanese in created games. I just felt when I was younger that those stories were the best. So franchises like Final Fantasy and Fire Emblem, even Kingdom Hearts. That's kind of embarrassing to admit. They
No,
just had
you're in good company.
cool. They just had really compelling stories, and they wrestled with truths. Like a lot of those studios and creators, I imagine most of them wouldn't profess to be believers, but they were very comfortable wrestling with the human experience in a way that was honest. And then again, try to convince me that, if I sleep all day, I'll be better off. They tried to convince me that, sacrifice and, just putting other people's first, stuff like that, actually really mattered.
I love that. I love that so much. And I do think that that is one message that um, some people are not quite as aware of because they have not experienced it themselves. Is just that there is immense influence right now in entertainment. There always has been, and there really has been an uptick in that influence, just in the more ways we have access to media. Um, but the enrichment that can come from video games surprised me. And I'm a book person through and through, book and moody cinema, like that's kind of me, right? But as I get into some of these video game stories, I realize, wow, there's so much depth here, or there's so much challenge here that really speaks to the reality of what it is to be human. And so someone who's not engaged with that doesn't see the value in that. Um, so I think that's really cool that that was part of an influence, and because of potentially your exposure to the Lord and to the Word, you recognize truth right where it was, and that's the nature of truth, right?
Yeah, but the more you like, the closer you are to God, and the more you intentionally look for it, I don't think it's always that hard to recognize truth. Again, we live in a time where the lines like to be blurred a lot, especially if you spend a lot of time online. Um, but yeah, I think if though for those who are urgently seeking truth, the way I think of God, I think God likes to reveal Himself to those who are urgently seeking Him or what's actually true.
Yeah, Scripture says, "Seek me, and you will find me." Right?
Yeah, yes, it does.
Praise God, and um, yeah. So okay. So within that, I would love to talk a little bit, or for a little while, about what it really is to be a professional artist in, the year of our Lord 2026 and beyond. There's so much going on. You mentioned kind of an animation renaissance. I think that's a really amazing thing to point out, and I agree. I think of so many cool creatives that I've seen on Shorts and Instagram and YouTube just come out of nowhere, and they just do this thing, and then they build up from there, and it's beautiful to behold. But what are some of the opportunities and some of the challenges of what it means to be an artist today?
Yeah, I'd say one of the opportunities is, um, and it sounds like you are also paying attention to some of the trends online. It is just really easy, and I use the word easy loosely because it's always going to be a lot of work to do anything meaningful. But it's more approachable than ever before to make a platform that people will pay attention to, specifically if it's good, specifically if it's authentic. Um, I quite honestly am blown away by like the number of challenge channels on like YouTube that are, whether it be someone trying to just like lead their version of a Bible study or just like reflect on what God's doing in their life. I feel like those videos are getting a lot more views today than they were 10 years ago.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I'm also seeing some trends where, uh, uh, there are channels that, use AI to get this across, and that's its own conversation. But I do see some illustrated channels, well, for the Bible Project, for instance. Some people have opinions about the Bible Project, but just like VeggieTales, I think it is a great introductory to those who are completely unfamiliar with God's word to figure out, oh, there's a lot of depth and complexity here, and this stuff is worth learning about. Um, And I think the Bible Project uses animation incredibly well to do that. But you don't have to be a super studio like the one behind the Bible Project. I've seen, quite honestly, high schoolers build some following and just be like, this is something I learned this week. And people react to it. So, very exciting time, in my opinion. I think you also mentioned, like, what are some of the dangers? Um, I, Unfortunately, in order to get some of that attention that is very natural. A lot of folks naturally seek out. Trends really help, and not all trends are really healthy. So I do think there is this trap that captures a lot of creatives where they want to get momentum faster, and maybe they get a little impatient, so they work too hard and they burn themselves out, or they start compromising their values a little bit. Um, and if you look for it, you can avoid it, but I think that's a very tempting trap for a lot of creatives.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. Just the reality of fame is more attainable or approachable, possibly, but the effort to get there looks way different than the slow and steady. Or sometimes people can think, I've got to put all this effort in on the front end and go as fast because this might be my moment and it might be the only chance that I have. So I think that's really interesting, and sad and true. And I think we see it way too much. There's a man, I can't quite remember his name last night right now, so maybe I won't mention his channel specifically, but he talks about, even still, even today, how important it is to build a portfolio, take your time, do it well, do it right, and continue to be someone who's contributing, but not to be someone who's everywhere all the time, as fast as possible, because like we only have so much in us. So definitely a sentiment that's um, conveyed if our young people are listening, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, there was I decided, and this was my perspective from the outset. I said, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to make a ridiculous amount of like animated shorts. I'm just going to upload every single week for like half a year, maybe closer to like 8 months. Um, and it was really fun. And then I completely burned myself out. Uh, and it was interesting. I imagine I had an experience a lot of people did where like some of my videos would perform well. And it's like, oh, wow, this is neat. And then others just wouldn't perform well. It's like, but I like that one. Why didn't other people like that one? Um, but what's nice is like even through that experience where I didn't get the exact results I was looking for, I can easily look back in that season and see how, oh, a lot of the things I learned when I was just like sprinting for 8 months has allowed me to more confidently produce some of the shows like I'm helping create right now. It's because I put myself through this rigorous, um, again, almost rite of passage like season where I worked myself a little too hard, but now I get the experience the fruit later, where I can take what I learned and even like pass it on to some people who could benefit from that knowledge. But burnout is not fun. Most artists have experienced it. If you haven't, they will at some point. Um, but I think you can learn how to avoid it, and I ultimately think it's a reminder to maintain balance. Even if you're passionate, even if you have good goals, like I still personally think you need balance in life.
Yeah, and so for a student entering the workforce, would you encourage them to take any opportunity, even if it wasn't something they could apply passion and discipline to? Or would you really strongly advise them to kind of lean towards projects that still inspired them, and that they could really connect with?
Yeah, my honest opinion, and I'll speak mostly to animators, but I'm sure there's some crossover into some other creative fields. I think when you're just starting off, you do everything you can. Um, the reason being, I'm learning one of the ways the world works is people will judge your value based off of what have you what experience do you have? What have you done professionally? Who have you worked with? Now, if your answer to that question is, well, I have no experience, I haven't done anything for anybody, sadly, people, even if you're a great artist, they just won't take you seriously. But if you have even a short list of, hey, I worked with these 4 YouTube creators. I worked with this podcast. They're all kind of small gigs, but I had fun with them and they went well. More people will take you seriously. So I think when you're
Hmm.
starting off, you just take what you can. Um, Again, from my experience, I think God very kindly led the kind of experience I'm talking about to my doorstep. So you should be looking, but like if God has his hand on your career, I think he loves to bring opportunities like the one I'm describing. But after you get to a certain point, you learn the wisdom of saying no. There are certain jobs I just won't do anymore. And it's because A, I've already built my credibility, and B, yeah, I'm just at a place where I want to work on stuff that bring me joy. And I like to think that I've earned that stage at this stage. So,
Yeah, do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do.
right.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That really could have gone either way, honestly. I was not really sure exactly how you'd answer. Just on the note of burnout, right? And just what that can
Mm,
potentially look like. Well, uh, speaking still about burnout, just a little bit, and I think this would be a kind of a fun segue into something that would be really beneficial to hear your perspective on. So for a dedicated time, I was working to build up a YouTube channel, my own personal YouTube channel, what have you. And I was expressing to a friend and to my husband different responses from both of them that, it's just so much work and effort, and I can't be all the places all at once. And my friend said, well, you could take your image and take your voice and put them into an AI with things that you would want it to say or content that you would make, but you don't necessarily have the time to make, that kind of thing. And you can give it permissions to essentially build you doing what you would do, but not you doing it. And I never pursued that because I had some kind of qualms and ethical qualms about that. But there is a reality to, even we've seen some animators kind of, we're watching some of their content and then we realize, wait, this one's a little bit different. This one's a little bit got kind of a different feel to the final product. And I wonder why. And there was speculation in the comments that the animator had begun using some AI to kind of shorten some of that workload. So,
mm.
in that vein, how are you advising students to interact with AI now? What's your stance on it? Just whatever you would want to say or contribute, kind of holding that question up for you.
Yeah. So one thing, if like AI is on your mind, I think one of the smartest things you can do is just grow to understand it more. I think when I look at how things are unfolding right now, a lot of people are getting their opinion on AI on like what the loudest voice that week says. And that'll give you a perspective. At this point, I'm not convinced it gives you a full perspective. Um, these AI technologies are very good, dare I say, incredibly impressive at some things. They are very lackluster in other areas. I'd argue they're very lackluster at any area that they're not proficiently good at. So I heard somebody use the example, and I'm sure some of you, maybe you're listening, heard this example. An area that is really, really helpful is the medical field. It is objectively helping diagnose some diseases faster. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. I want more of that as ethically as possible. At the same time, I just don't see how it's so I'll speak from an art standpoint because maybe
Yeah.
that's what I'm a little bit more an expert in. Um, so the number one term online in 2025 was AI slop.
Yeah.
That's the most searched term. And I think that's a story in and of itself. Not only was AI being discussed, but it was being discussed in I don't know if we like that. And that's kind of like how, a culture has been feeling online. And I think that's worth paying attention to. Um, when it comes to like my students and the path and or opportunity I think they have, I'm not really all that worried yet. Reason being, large studios don't use it. Now, large studios have tried to use it. Um, that is very evident. There have been attempts made, but two things are happening for the studios that have tried to use it. One, the quality isn't that great, and to get the quality to be at the place they want it to be, it just eats up a lot of time. Like, why spend I'll just make up some numbers, 2, 3 hours
Mhm.
trying to get it to make a picture just right when you can spend 2 hours with somebody who could do it in less time. Um, and then, it sometimes feels empty, and I'll get to that in a second. But also, I think people forget that AI is not free. I think there's this picture that's been painted that, like, just use AI, like it's free and it solves everything. There is this term called token maxing that is gaining steam online, and it's the reality that the tokens used to pay out AI systems is going up. And so it's not free. It actually costs quite a bit. And so if you're going to spend money anyway, why not invest in the better product through an artist? So, yeah, as you can tell, I have a lot of opinions on this. I would actually encourage people to explore and learn, what do these technologies do? What do they actually do well? But again, when I jump on Instagram, specifically with small studios, I see more like hiring posts for small studios than ever before. Uh, and I think that's interesting because I think AI is a perfect opportunity for small studios, but where the money is going is no, these small studios recognize I'd still rather invest in an artist because I want my final product to be good. Um, so that's the short version.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and honestly, I'm sure you have so much more to say too. Like, eh, so would you then say that there's any instance in which an artistic or creative student should implement AI? You said, learn what it can do, and how would that kind of work out in some practical
Mhm.
applications?
Yeah, so I think there are certain tools that are helpful. One way that, AI is just this term that it it's an umbrella term for, if we're being honest, hundreds of different tools.
Hmm.
And I think that's tough too, because you could be talking about one tool and somebody hates this tool over here. So when you say AI, they're thinking about this tool over here. And you're not even talking about the same thing. Um, but I find it helpful on occasion to just brainstorm. So, for instance, I own my own small studio. I hire artists. I pay my artists. But sometimes, because I'm new to business, I'll have business questions, and I could just
Totally.
be like, "Hey, what's a smart direction to take my business?" And it'll give me ideas, and I'll be like, "I hate all those ideas. That one has potential. Let me play with it more to actually utilize it in a good way." So I find it helpful, to just ask questions from time to time, and then I make my own call. Um, yeah, but it really comes down to the person. I know there are some other artists who find other clever ways to use it. Just with AI generation, it's just not my cup of tea. I always want to deliver the best product possible, and I never want like the stuff I invest a lot of time and or money into to be like questioned by people. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So story time. This is actually AI generated art, but not in the
Ooh.
way you might think. I was feeling creative one day, and I'm not very creative. I don't know if I said that earlier. And so I am learning the discipline of creativity. And so I felt like being creative, but I didn't know where to start. And composition is one of my weakest points. And so
Mm,
I just said, I want to do a landscape, give me some ideas. And so it's generated because it generated the prompt for me, but I
mm.
created the work. So it just kind of took one mental step away. And in ways, I don't really see that as a different integration than going to some person and saying, hey, give me an idea of something to draw today. So like
Yeah,
that could
again,
be, yeah.
it's a fascinating tool. We're gonna see it implemented in a number of different ways over time. Talking to the artists, again, I would just recommend understanding the tool, because then at the very least you'll know, where is it legitimate and where will it maybe eat up more of your time than you
Mhm.
think. Um, I also just want to add that uh, when you create art, it's such like specifically when you dive into a bigger project, that journey is just as much as the final product. And I know I feel like I sound like I just read, off of a fortune cookie. But the projects I have worked on have changed me as a person. And some of the projects my students work on here, they are different people at the end of that project. That
Mm.
has its truly has its own merit. Um, and so from, it will change you potentially in a positive way, and like more people will appreciate it. Um, if you've made something yourself that expresses what you understand about the human experience, uh, yeah, I think we're gonna live in a world where both will exist, where, we will have AR art and it'll serve its purpose. The people who find a use for it will undoubtedly, and I'll be happy for them. But then we'll also have artists, and I personally think we'll have a special appreciation for artists who do the hard work to, yeah, do what God's instilled in them to do.
Yeah, praise God. And do you think that human made art will actually increase in value and appreciation? Um,
I think that's a very likely possibility. The future is impossible to predict. Uh, Yeah. I love looking at like the traditional art world where with each passing year, paintings seem to be more and more valuable. And I'm not just talking about like the Van Goghs. There are artists who just will teach themselves to paint in their bedrooms and will sell their paintings for thousands of dollars. So I think it's a very fair argument to say that the more people make stuff, in the world we live in, it'll be appreciated in a different sense, but it will definitely still be appreciated.
I agree with that. And that's one of the exciting possibilities that I see in the future. I mean, I watch some videos on what Claude's latest release can do and what it can produce and how it can make a video game or, create a whole world or something. And yet, all of those are based on the previous work of other artists or other creatives who needed to be able to come up with these ideas and needed to be able to direct those kinds of things. So for your students, for your circles, for the people that you work with, um, what do you think or how do you advise people to kind of protect their work? Or is there not really a concern for that?
That's a really good question. To be honest, I'm still figuring that out too.
Yeah.
Because it is a bummer that like it's so easy to steal art. There have been some counterplays that have been popping up here and there. Apparently, there are programs now that you can encode your art with. So what it
Mm.
does is it distorts the line in your art in such a small way that it's really hard to perceive with like the human eye. But when it gets picked up by these algorithms and AI systems, it distorts how it understands your work. So I think that is one counter that some artists have discovered can protect some of their work. Um, but yeah, again, I just think personally, I think the internet as we know it today in the next 10 years is going to look totally different. I think we've
Yeah.
hit this moment where everything's going to pivot. I think we'll have a lot of website we know today that are like just loaded with a lot more generated stuff, but I also think there's going to be a community where like that's just not what it's going to be looking for, and that will thrive in its own way. So yeah, that's the new game.
Yeah, I think that's very wise and very cool to hear, kind of from that inside perspective. Because I know several artists who are very, very concerned about AI, very anti-AI, would like to see it shut down, at least in the creative sense. And I've always taken the approach with anything in life that, God knew what time you were going to be in, and that we have kind of a mandate to understand those times and to speak well into them. And sometimes that does mean denying something and not participating. And then other times it means, learning it and being, not letting it be your master, but you becoming master over it.
Mm, that's really really good. I might borrow some of that.
So some mom noodling. I loved earlier too how you said some of your best ideas and moments come out of just sitting in silence. I think especially in our busy, loud world, there's not enough of that discipline of silence and quiet and space. And that is really where God meets us so often. Um, I was going to tell a joke, but never mind. I shouldn't. I'm not good at jokes, but I do them anyways. Anyway.
Hey, jokes are an art form. I think we need all flavors, the ones that stick with you forever and the ones where you're like, yeah, that happened.
Yeah. Oh, praise God. Well, sometimes though I will say something and my youngest she'll kind of turn to me in love and say, "That was not fully baked. Put it back in the oven." I
That's
don't
a
know what
that's a very eloquent way to put it.
I don't know where she comes up with those, but I get a lot of them. Well, I have really, really appreciated and enjoyed our conversation so, so much. And I was wondering if there's anything in particular that you wanted to talk about before we kind of wind down and potentially open up for some live questions.
Yeah, I just want to be an encouragement to anybody who's watching this. Whether you consider yourself an artist or not, chances are you'll probably express yourself creatively at some shape or form. Cooking is an art form. I really appreciate a really good cook. They make a meal like no other. Um, and the way I would like to encourage this particular group is recognizing that I'd argue that artists are more needed today almost than ever before. We talked about, how AI slop was one of the most popular terms in 2025 among influencer circles. Authenticity is like the most used word, and I think that again reflects the hunger in the world today for authenticity. I think creativity is a great way to speak into authenticity because, in its purest form, it's something only you can do. And then at the university I work at, one of our slogan is "Create it to create." We really believe that we were, to varying degrees, all of us were put on this world to create. And when you do create in a way that God has, positioned you to do, I think some of you have no idea the rippling effect that can have and the positive impact that can have. So, yeah, if you're listening to this, I hope you guys all stay creative in how you communicate and how you write and how you even come up with new ideas. Um, there's a need for that right now, and yeah, I'm excited for this next generation. I think this up and coming generation is just what we need to speak into that creative need that needs to be met at this point in time.
Yeah, praise God. And I especially like how you said that part of it too is the journey. It's not just the outcome, because the journey helps you to hone those skills and
Yeah,
hone that ability to continue to create. So I love that. I
yeah.
think
For
it's so
those
true.
watching, I talked about how I didn't really draw a ton in high school. I didn't really start liking my art until at least maybe 6 to 8 years into drawing. Now that doesn't
Wow.
mean I wasn't making anything good. Like I made stuff that I was like, that was okay. But like it wasn't until I hit, I was almost 8 years into my career where it's like, I want to show people my stuff. I feel like I've really arrived in a sense. And I'm still growing even to today. So yeah, I just share that now. It is a process. If you can make the process fun, um, again, something else I share with my class is I encourage them to make stuff that's fun first and then great later. You learn by just making stuff fun, by keeping the process fun for you. And then if you do that long enough, you'll get to the point where you can make something great. So I hope you guys all embrace that journey if you feel like that's a calling.
Wow, that's really, really neat. I love that. Yeah, just show up and just do it. And if you love doing it, keep doing it and it'll get better. I love that.
Simple as that.
Oh, I was just kind of reflecting on, if you just show up and you just do it, and if you love it, you'll just continue to get better at it.
It's fantastic.
Well, I love ending these discussions by asking two very important questions. One is, what gives you hope when you think about the next generation of Christian creatives and professionals? And I know you already touched on that a little.
Mhm. So I work a lot with Gen Z. In a few years, if I'm lucky, I'll be working with Gen Alpha. I'm nervous about that, but I'm going to trust that kids will remain kids. Um, but what does encourage me when I interact with young people is I just get the sense that they care really, really deeply about matters they understand and matters they don't completely understand. But I think that's a great starting point to just really care and to strive or to have a heart to want to see growth and improvement. I also feel like this generation, almost more than some millennials, is very open to spirituality.
Yeah.
Now, that may not directly translate into being open to the gospel just yet, but I found it very natural and easy to talk about faith with people. I don't typically get big pushback inside the school and outside the school. Um, And I think that's refreshing. I think that's a promising sign. And I also feel like this upcoming generation is just very gifted. Uh, the students that are coming in the past 2 years have been some of the most talented groups I've ever seen. They're making work that like eclipses the work or is on the level of work I was seeing almost in grad school. Now that sounds absurd, but a lot of the artists who are like nearing college age have just been drawing for literally their entire lives. Like they're getting tablets at 5 and it shows. So, while I don't think raising kids with tablets is necessarily the move, I do think it is neat that has inspired some people to start expressing themselves a whole lot earlier. So they just care deeply, open to faith, at least more so than the years I was growing up with, and just a very gifted generation.
Yeah, praise God. Again, on that note of just embracing, right? I mean, for Mozart, it was the piano, and look at all that he was able to accomplish, right? He was trained up in something very niche and was able to make it his life's work. And it's how his mind was illuminated and trained, and how God made his brain to work, and what he was also given the opportunity to thrive in. And so you're not wrong. These kids, they're more tech savvy, tech exposed, and what they can do is like leaps and bounds beyond what we can. And yet they do need that apprenticeship and that opportunity for discipleship. Love it.
Yeah.
And what is one truth that you hope students carry with them long after they leave your college or classroom?
So if I got to pick and choose, I would be boring, and I would say I would just love for them to walk away with the keen knowledge and understanding that God loves them, because I think that'll have the most impact over their lives. Um, but a lot of our stories are stories. Our students aren't at a point where they're willing to fully embrace that, even if I tell them that. So in addition to that, I would just want to instill that they each have a purpose. I think that's a really good jumping off point, even if certain folks aren't ready to accept the gospel. Um, I want them to learn to persevere. I think we live in a world where perseverance is kind of needed. And I don't think a lot of people are built for perseverance right now, which is a little heartbreaking. I think the world is harder than people step into adulthood thinking it's going to be. But if you can persevere, you can make it. And I want, God to use their gifts for great purpose. So, yeah, that's what I hope that they come away with.
Well, I think that's really beautiful, and definitely things that I've heard you talk about, how you aim yourself and how you present yourself, and the wisdom, knowledge, and experience that you have. So that's all so beautiful to hear. Before we open up for questions and answers, and as we wrap up the official side of the podcast, where can people find you? And do you want to tell us about any specifics of any projects that you're working on, or your studio, or anything?
Yeah. This is really, really embarrassing because, as an artist, I should have a platform. And I do have a platform. I kid you not, I'm currently in the middle of a rebrand. So the short version is, like I mentioned, I'm making cartoons now. That's really, really cool. I'm getting ready to launch some of them. But in preparation for my launch, I wiped my Instagram. I was like, I'm going to make this all about the project I'm working on. So my Instagram is Chris Comics. It is empty right now. It's humbling. But I'm excited. I'm excited to be able to shake up my brand, position myself as someone who not only teaches university classes, but is also actively developing series, and then use my platform to share what that process looks like. So, yeah, Chris Comics, more info coming soon, I guess.
That's great. Yeah. No, I love it. And I love the focus too, that, the Instagram is now the preparation field for what's coming. And full transparency, we are also updating things constantly and rebranding this and doing this and that. So I get it. And there is a little bit of that, like, it's there, but don't go look yet. Look next week. I promise.
Exactly.
Well, cool. Praise God. And can people access your animated kid series? Is that available anywhere?
Mm, no,
Not
not yet. Uh,
yet.
So yeah, a lot of people are dropping their pilots on YouTube, and that's cool. I want to talk to some streaming services first. I think if
Yeah.
I give up everything's just on YouTube, those conversations are a little different. But I just want to pitch to some studios first. So by the end of the year, I should have an update.
Wow, that is so cool to get to pray into. And I hope those conversations go really well. That's so exciting and bold and confident. I love it. I love it. So much possibility in that. Well, thank you again so much, Professor Washington. It has been so great to get to talk to you and relate with you. I'm so glad truly for the work that you're doing. And just if I'm so glad that God has positioned you to be with the heart mindset that you have, um, able to apprentice and mentor and disciple and equip the next generation for all that God has for them. And to also get to model and present the gospel and the reality of the gospel in your life. So just thank you for all of that, and for being willing to come on and be a guest on our podcast. And on a personal note, thank you so much for honestly the way that you have inspired our family and inspired conversations in our family, and even equipped our daughter to just continue towards excellence, and to be inspired by your example. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it was a joy to have this conversation with you. I love just talking, specifically to people who just want to discuss questions that really, really matter. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the entire Moore family at this point.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, praise God. Oh, thank you so much. Well, um, with that, we do have some questions if you would like to answer some of them. So let's see. Thank you. Do you have them ordered by the artist? Okay, I appreciate that. So, question is, do you think there's value in having Christian artists work in secular spaces or studios so they can have influence there?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think there is always value in coming into a space that has, influence, has potential, and just filling it with God's goodness and maybe even nudging a show or a team in a direction that is God honoring. I think it happens more than a lot of people think. Um, and yeah, if you get the opportunity, I would embrace it. Again, the one arena I'd caution it is if you're say work you got the opportunity to work on a program for a studio that like just celebrates what isn't God honoring, thinks breaking the Ten Commandments is cool. But if it's like a show that like has good morals and you think will be a net positive versus a net negative, I think there's all sorts of interesting opportunities that could come with that. So
Yeah, I agree. Very cool. Um, yes, I won't share that. But so your next question is, as a Christian father, my 10-year-old daughter loves to draw, but I know the profession can be hard to get into. What encouragement would you give to start? Wow, 10. So sweet.
I'm telling you, they're starting so young. It's
Mm.
it's next level. Yeah, no, I appreciate your question. Um, so here's the interesting thing about art. Like I've hinted at a little bit earlier, it is a transformative experience. Um, when I was 16 years old, I was able to write and self-publish my first novel. I actually think that really kicked off this storytelling journey for me. Now, I'm not in a position where I'm writing novels currently, even though I'm super excited to give it a try again. But I kid you not, the discipline and the focus of just creating art helped prepare me for so many different careers. So if your daughter enjoys making art, again, they will learn discipline and learn about themselves through exploring that, especially when they're young. Um, Also, again, it's an interesting time because it's impossible to predict exactly where the media world is going. I choose to be optimistic. I like to think we're segueing away from Hollywood controls all the key things that people watch and are moving more towards actually, if you're just really good at what you do, you can build an audience. And if you can build an audience, you might be able to build a career off of this sort of thing. So Yeah, again, to summarize, I would encourage your daughter to explore the interests, even if she doesn't go specifically in the direction of an animation career. Some of the things she's learning could actually also speak into what path she does, choose to go to. So maybe she say, for instance, she goes into ministry. She could be a minister who can like whip up an awesome illustration whenever is needed. I think that's really, really cool too.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought about it like that. That um, really any discipline that teaches you about yourself prepares you for things that you could be called into next.
hmm God does
Yeah,
it all the time.
right? Love that. Okay, your next question is what should a creative do with when their ambition is greater than their current ability? Hmm. And how can they receive criticism without becoming discouraged or defensive?
Ooh, another really good question. This is definitely coming from an artist 100% because I wrestle with these thoughts and so many of a lot of my peers. Um, so here's uh, hopefully this is helpful. Every artist has really, really big ambitions for the most part. I think if a lot of artists got the opportunity to, um, direct a film or write an album with backing, they would jump at it and they'd probably be in a little over, they'd be jumping into a deeper pool than they originally expect. I have learned the most when I try to be overly ambitious because it strengthens where I'm at currently skill wise. And then it also shows me where my weaknesses are. And then I can like target those weaknesses and grow in that way. So personally, I'm a big fan of just like diving into really big projects, knowing they're not going to turn out perfect, but knowing I'm going to come out the other side one step closer to making that show or making that album or making that film. So hopefully that helps. I'm right there with you. I have ideas that are probably a little bit too ambitious for me, if I'm being honest, but I'm going to chase them anyway and trust that God will like direct how that pursuit can, you know, put me on the right path down the road.
Yeah. And so would you say that then they could view that criticism as an opportunity to
Ooh.
grow instead of, just a disqualifier for them?
Yeah, I appreciate that follow up because I did want to say something about that. I really believe that all criticism is not created equal. I think you can get feedback from some people who would be very helpful and insightful and true. I also think you can get feedback that will point you in not the direction that you're looking for or that you need. So, what I recommend is if you're looking for feedback, you specifically want to ask not just the internet, you'll get
Yeah.
anything and everything, but find somebody in your life that you trust or find somebody that maybe will respond to you that you respect. And that feedback's actually going to be helpful and probably a little bit more balanced too. So yeah, you want to curate who you get feedback from, but you definitely try not to be defensive, but you need to hear what people have to say if you trust them.
Yeah, I think that's such great perspective and so honest and good. I know in our own lives, we don't let our children put their creative interests on the internet yet. Um, and I think it helps them grow to have a little bit of that insulation, but also, um, I have observed that a lot of this generation, and I guess in fairness, just human nature, people might seek out more affirmation than criticism, right? Or I want to hear from people who tell me I'm awesome instead of people who tell me like that nose looks weird,
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. It's so true.
it's kind of hard to give the advice that's accurate, which is be discerning about who you get advice from, but also give the advice of, but get advice from someone who's going to love you enough to tell you what needs to be improved.
Yeah, and again, if you ask the right person, that feedback should like just make you better. The right person wants to see you get better. Um, Yeah. So, I mean, in my classroom, we do critique sandwiches where we say something nice, we say something to improve upon, and then say something nice at the end, and that's nice. But you'll get both, and that's just part of being an artist.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very true. Okay. Our next question is, how can you approach art and posting with consistency while also avoiding burnout?
Ooh, another really good question from a true artist in the room. So there's this interesting balance when it comes to growing as an artist, where, as I mentioned before, you want to make it as fun as possible because then there's a little bit more extra motivation. But there is a discipline that comes with it too. Uh, I have a conviction that with the goals I have in mind, I wake up at around like 6 a.m. every day. And the first thing I do is I pray. And then I spend like 60 to 90 minutes, depending on the day, just creating art and like pushing towards my personal art goals. This has changed my life for the better since I started doing this almost a decade ago. I just got into this routine. There are days when I'm excited to wake up and it's like, let's draw. There are also days where it's like, man, I just want to sleep in. I want to I just want to veg and just watch some stuff this morning. But I make myself do it anyway. And I think I'm rewarded when I keep at it, even when I don't feel like it. So you'll want to find a routine that feels good for you, where you feel like it's reasonable. You're doing something fun, but you're also keeping yourself accountable. And the posting, I'm the last person to ask. I hate social media, like posting specifically on social media. I'm just, from a business standpoint, embracing it as a businessman.
Yeah, as a
um,
tool.
yeah, but the healthiest relationship I had with social media was when I just had like a bunch of posts lined up. Oops. So like I was making a batch of like art and videos, and then I would just like drop one a week. And so when I had a schedule and I limited myself to one or two posts a week, I could post it and then forget about it. And that was healthy for me because then I wasn't hovering over my phone like, what do I post? Or like, did anybody like it? I had a system. I just followed the system, and that made it easier for me. But every artist is different. You're going to have to experiment to find the balance you're most likely looking for. I don't expect everybody to wake up at 6 a.m. like me. Uh, I've learned that's a little unusual through talking to people over the years.
Praise God. And I really loved your comments earlier too. Just in case whoever asked that may have missed it, it's worth going back. Just talking about the reality of honing in on your purpose, and letting your purpose direct your activity, more than momentarily chasing a trend or a goal, or um, getting the what's the word I want to use? Unsustainable notoriety.
Yeah.
Okay. This is something I'll never relate with because I've never been a perfectionist in anything in my entire existence, except maybe eyeliner. How do you fight perfectionism as an artist? I tend to start ideas very motivated, but fall out of love with said idea because it doesn't meet my own expectation.
Ooh, that's a really, really good question too. So I'll speak a little bit to my experience. I think that's what I know the best. The biggest hurdle I had to overcome when I was in college, if you were here earlier, you may have heard I was like the second worst student in my class because I didn't have an art background. I just decided I'd work really hard. But I had to let go of perfectionism. I quite literally thought that every line on the paper or screen had to be perfect. And if I had one bad line, it was trash. God put some good mentors in my life, and He helped me realize, oh no, like there is beauty in the messiness. So when I abandon every line being perfect and let myself be sloppy, but then slowly fine tuning it so I felt better about it, that unlocked something truly necessary in me. So if possible, and I know it's not easy, but see if you can figure out how do you let go of perfectionism? How can you find beauty in the messy? Maybe you can find some artists who also their style's a little messy, but you still kind of like it. That might be proof that frees you up a little bit. Um, and then you start off feeling motivation but fall out of love. There's a good chance that you might be starting with some really ambitious project. I know literally a second ago I said be too ambitious, you'll learn a lot. But you can also build up to that point too. I advise a lot of my youngest students to just get used to drawing like 15 minutes a day and then 30 minutes a day. If you just draw 15 minutes a day and then maybe even force yourself to stop, um, you'll still grow and then you'll chip closer towards meeting your expectations. Everybody wants to hit the basketball court and I can hit threes. But Steph Curry, Part of his testimony is he had a season where he shot 1,000 shots a day, a number that's so ridiculous. You hear it for the first time, and you're like, "What?" He shot 1,000 shots a day. So the animation or the art version of that is at least 30 minutes a day, and you will improve. You just have to chip away at it.
Yeah, I think that's such, I'm thinking of our social media kind of commentary a few minutes ago, and that is probably one of, you'd think, the biggest motivations for people to show up and be really creative and produce really great stuff. But actually, when there is that robbing of performance or acceptance or approval in every single thing that you post, you're no longer doing it to learn, to grow, to get better, to just be disciplined, to just show up. You're doing it for the approval. And if your only motivation is the approval,
Yeah.
then you miss all that work and good things that come out of the mess or what have you.
Yep. The mess can be beautiful itself. I look back at some of my old drawings and I both cringe and I'm like, look how far I've come at the same time.
Yeah, praise God. So cool. Um, how do you prioritize making art while also being a father? Great question.
Ooh, really good question. So this question has to be answered with the bias. I only have one kid right now, and he's very young, so I can only speak to that experience. I think having a house full of teenagers is probably different. Um, but from where I'm at right now, again, I find a lot of freedom in structure. And some people hear that and they think those are two different things, freedom and structure. But like I mentioned, I like to wake up in the morning. uh, I'm kind of a morning person, but I also know that my son won't be up until 8 o'clock. And so I can draw, and not feel guilty because he's not even awake yet. Usually, once he wakes up, I have breakfast with him. And so I spend like an hour or so with my son in the morning. My job allows me to do that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I like to structure where there's work time, but then what's just as important is the time with my kids. Um, I think I read once that there was a study that was speaking into the pressure a lot of parents feel and feeling like you have to be available with your kids all the time. But the study kind of showcased that we don't have to spend 24/7 with our kids for them to feel loved and invested in. If you spend anywhere between I think it was like 30 minutes to 40 minutes a day, and you do something with them that they enjoy, that's going to be enough for them to feel loved and seen. Now you can spend more. I think it's great to spend more, but I personally needed that perspective so I didn't feel guilty for not spending every waking hour with my kid. From the dad standpoint, they want a relationship with you. They wanted undistracted time with you. But yeah, you can structure that in, and I think that that's okay too.
Yeah, I read an article once where this woman, I think she was like a CEO of her own little entrepreneurship or something. I don't know why I just said little. I wasn't trying to belittle her experience, but she was asked what one of the factors was for her success, and she said, "My mother played piano." And when she explained that, she said, "My mother made it very clear to us that she loved us and cared for us and was providing for us. And yet she went away and did things for her improvement and her betterment consistently and modeled that for us as well. And so we understood that there were important things in her day, life, and time. And we were one of them, but also pursuing excellence in her own kind of area was worthy as an adult for her time to go into just as much as we were worthy." So I've always thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then I think this is a given. If they're young enough, this might be tough with 15-year-olds, but invite them into what you do. My son likes to draw next to me now, and that's really fulfilling for both of us. It's the only time he's allowed to touch an iPad. Is if he's drawing with dad. Um, but yeah, it's been fun inviting him into that corner of my life sometimes.
That's beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you so much again for your time and for answering those questions live and on the spot. I know that it was really helpful and impactful for people, and for all the people who will get to watch this afterwards. So I just appreciate you being here again so much. And if anyone here was blessed by this conversation and want to connect more deeply with this community, I encourage you to join us on discord.gg/hopeful disasters. Come get to know us, share your story. We'd love to walk with you, hang out with you, befriend you, and help you in any way that we can if that's what you're looking for too. So thank you again for being here. And I just appreciate the time with all of you. And just can't wait to see what God is going to continue to do with your diligence and your creativity.